Discovered a rare spaceship at auction. Unfortunately, it will be dismantled. Rockets, satellites, old spacecraft, anything that could fly beyond the Earth captured his imagination. As he grew older, that fascination turned into a passion for collecting rare aerospace items. He spent countless hours browsing auctions, visiting private collectors, and reading old technical manuals. He knew the history of space exploration better than most historians. Every small detail of a rocket or a spacecraft prototype mattered to him because he could see the story behind it. One cold, rainy afternoon, Alex received an unexpected email. It was from a small auction house in a quiet town in New Mexico. They were holding an estate sale for a recently deceased collector, and the catalog listed dozens of unusual items. Most of the items were old furniture, antique tools, and dusty memorabilia, but something in the description caught Alex's attention. Among the miscellaneous objects, there was a single listing that simply said, "Experimental aerospace artifact, details unknown." That vague description was enough to spark Alex's curiosity. He packed his bags, drove for hours, and arrived at the auction house just as the rain began to lighten. The auction house was small and unremarkable from the outside, but inside it was like stepping into another world. The scent of old wood and dust filled the air. Rows of tables were stacked with boxes of belongings, old cameras, yellowed papers, vintage radios, and items that had not been touched in decades. Auction staff moved briskly, preparing for the next group of buyers to arrive. Alex wandered slowly through the room, carefully examining each item. He had learned over the years that treasures were often hidden in plain sight. Often, the most valuable things were overlooked by people who didn't understand their importance. Then, near the back of the room, something unusual caught his eye. In a corner, partially covered with a faded tarp, was a metallic object. At first, he thought it was a simple model or a decorative piece, but the shape was wrong for anything he had seen before. It was not symmetrical like a model, nor light like aluminum. The metal looked old but well preserved. Its surface had tiny rivets and seams, like it had been carefully constructed for a purpose beyond decoration. Alex's heart began to beat faster. He slowly lifted the tarp, careful not to disturb anything. Beneath it lay a small spacecraft, about the size of a compact car, sleek but heavy, with unusual design features that didn't match any commercial or military models he knew. Alex crouched down to examine the craft. The cockpit was small, barely enough for one person. Its canopy was scratched and slightly fogged, but he could see the controls inside. There were levers, dials, and a strange combination of switches that hinted at experimental technology. The hull was made of a metal he couldn't immediately identify, one that seemed both lightweight and strong. There were markings along the side, numbers and letters that suggested it had been part of a classified program long forgotten. He ran his fingers along the smooth metal, feeling the coolness of history beneath his touch. He had discovered many rare items before, but this was extraordinary. For a moment, Alex simply stared. His mind raced with possibilities. Could this be one of the experimental spacecraft prototypes developed during the early days of space exploration? Could it have been hidden away for decades, forgotten by time and the world? Every story he had read about lost spacecraft or mysterious projects flashed through his mind. He had heard rumors of prototypes that never made it to public knowledge, of ships tested in secrecy and then quietly retired. And now here it was in front of him, waiting to be rediscovered. He carefully examined every detail he could reach. The landing gear was retractable, though it looked like it had never been used. The metal panels had subtle scratches and dents, suggesting careful handling rather than long-term exposure to harsh conditions. Alex noticed tiny components under the hull that hinted at advanced propulsion systems, far ahead of their time. His excitement grew with every discovery. He realized that this wasn't just a collectible. This was a piece of history, one that could tell a story about the early days of experimental aerospace engineering. As he studied the craft, Alex noticed a small plaque inside the cockpit. The lettering was faded, but he could make out a series of numbers and letters that seemed to match a code used by early space programs in the 1960s. His pulse quickened. This code indicated that the craft might have been a prototype, designed for a program that had long been declassified as lost. In his mind, Alex imagined the engineers who had worked tirelessly on this project, pouring their skill and hope into a machine meant to explore the unknown. And now, decades later, he was holding it in his hands. The auction staff noticed his fascination and approached cautiously. "That one isn't really listed in detail," said a young woman, her voice polite but slightly nervous. "It belonged to the previous owner. They never explained much about it. You might want to take a closer look, but, well, it's part of the auction." Alex nodded, understanding that he had to act carefully. He didn't want to draw too much attention. He wanted to study the craft, verify its authenticity, and understand what he had found before anyone else could interfere. He moved back to a quieter corner of the room, taking out his notebook and camera. Every detail mattered. He photographed the hull, the cockpit, the markings, and the internal components he could safely see. He sketched diagrams of the unusual switches and levers, noting materials and measurements. Alex knew that even if he couldn't immediately purchase the craft, this documentation could help him authenticate it later. And the more he studied it, the more he realized how rare this object truly was. As the day went on, more bidders arrived for the estate auction. Some were interested in antique furniture, some in collectible memorabilia, and a few in military items. But none seemed to notice the craft tucked away in the corner. Alex felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Relief that others hadn't spotted it yet, but anxiety that once its significance was recognized, there would be fierce competition. He made a mental note to stay close and not let it slip through his hands. By late afternoon, the auction began. The general items went quickly: tables, chairs, radios, and vintage cameras sold to eager collectors. Alex watched, waiting for his chance. Finally, the auctioneer announced the unusual aerospace artifact. The room grew quiet. A few people approached, curious about the metallic craft. Alex raised his hand, signaling his interest. The auctioneer's eyes lingered on him briefly, then began the bidding. The bidding started slowly. Alex felt the tension in the room, a mix of excitement and nervousness. He knew the true value of the spacecraft, both in historical terms and potential research significance. He didn't want to overpay, but he couldn't let it go to someone who would dismantle it without understanding its importance. With careful strategy, he entered the bids, gradually raising the stakes. The crowd murmured. Some recognized the rarity, others just saw a shiny object. Alex focused on the craft itself, imagining it being preserved, studied, and appreciated, rather than dismantled or forgotten. Hours passed, but Alex remained determined. Eventually, the auctioneer nodded and announced, "Sold to Mr. Thompson." A wave of relief and joy washed over him. He had secured the spaceship. But as he examined it once more, a thought crept into his mind. Owning it was only the first step. The real challenge would be preserving it, understanding it, and sharing its story with the world. He gently touched the metal hull, feeling the weight of history, responsibility, and opportunity. This was more than a purchase. It was a chance to make history visible again. Alex arranged for careful transport of the craft to his workshop. He knew that in the coming days, he would need to consult experts, verify authenticity, and plan for its long-term preservation. As he drove back through the rain-soaked roads, the metallic spaceship secured in the back of his van, he couldn't help but smile. The discovery had exceeded every expectation, and he felt a sense of awe at having witnessed something lost to time. For Alex, this was the moment every collector and historian dreamed of, a chance to hold a piece of human ingenuity that had quietly survived the decades, waiting to tell its story once more. That night, Alex sat in his study, reviewing the photographs and sketches he had made. He knew the journey ahead would be challenging, with legal, technical, and financial obstacles. But he also knew that some discoveries were too important to ignore. This small, metallic spaceship held stories of courage, experimentation, and human curiosity. And Alex Thompson had been lucky enough to uncover it, ready to honor its legacy. After securing the spaceship at the auction, Alex Thompson felt a mix of triumph and responsibility. He had found something extraordinary, but he knew the journey ahead would be far from simple. He carefully arranged for the craft to be transported to his private workshop. The van ride was quiet, except for the gentle hum of the engine and the soft patter of rain against the roof. Alex kept glancing at the metallic object in the back, marveling at its unusual design. Every curve, seam, and rivet told a story that he was eager to uncover. As soon as the spaceship arrived, Alex began the painstaking process of preliminary inspection. He wore gloves to protect the craft from oils and dirt, and he moved slowly, almost reverently, as he examined the hull and cockpit. He documented everything in his notebook, noting the materials, markings, and unusual features. The design was unlike anything he had seen in modern spacecraft or historical prototypes. The more he studied it, the more he realized this was not a mass-produced machine. It had been carefully built, with attention to detail that suggested it was experimental, likely part of a program that few people had ever known existed. Realizing the importance of authentic verification, Alex contacted several aerospace historians and engineers he trusted. He sent photographs, sketches, and detailed descriptions explaining what he had found. Responses came quickly, filled with excitement, disbelief, and curiosity. One historian, Dr. Elaine Morgan, a specialist in Cold War-era aerospace technology, responded with particular enthusiasm. She requested that Alex arrange a private viewing, emphasizing that the craft might represent a previously unknown prototype. Alex felt a thrill of anticipation. The possibility that he had uncovered something truly historic was growing stronger by the day. When Dr. Morgan and her team arrived, they examined the spaceship meticulously. They measured panels, studied markings, and tested the integrity of the metal. Alex watched closely as their expressions shifted from professional curiosity to astonishment. "This is unlike any known prototype we've documented," Dr. Morgan said quietly, almost in disbelief. "The alloys, the design, even the control layout, everything suggests this was part of a secret experimental program that was never publicized. You might have discovered a piece of aerospace history that has been lost for decades." Alex felt a surge of excitement. Every detail he had noticed on his own, the unusual rivets, the cockpit layout, and the odd propulsion components, was now being confirmed by experts. He realized that the craft might be older than he first imagined, potentially dating back to the early days of space exploration. Its construction suggested it was designed for a single pilot, likely for test flights or experimental missions. Alex imagined the engineers and scientists who had poured hours of effort into building and testing this ship, working in secrecy and under immense pressure. The thought filled him with respect and awe. Over the next few days, Alex worked with the team to analyze the markings and codes on the spaceship. They discovered numerical and alphabetical sequences that matched internal coding used by early experimental aerospace programs in the 1960s. Some codes were similar to those used in classified documents, which meant the craft could provide insights into a project that had been considered lost or forgotten. Alex's excitement grew, but he also felt a sense of caution. This was delicate history, and he needed to handle it responsibly. Every move had to be carefully documented to ensure that the craft's significance was preserved. In addition to historians, Alex brought in materials scientists to study the alloys used in the spaceship. The experts were amazed. "This metal is unlike anything typically used in spacecraft of this era," one scientist remarked. "It's incredibly light yet extremely durable." Whoever designed this was experimenting with advanced materials well ahead of their time. Alex listened intently, taking notes and photographs. The scientists even conducted non-invasive tests to understand the structural properties without damaging the craft. Each discovery made Alex more certain that he was holding something rare and valuable in every sense, not just as a collectible, but as a historical artifact. Word of the discovery began to spread quietly in specialized aerospace circles. Researchers, engineers, and collectors began reaching out to Alex, curious to learn more. Some wanted to see it in person, others requested detailed photographs and measurements. Alex felt proud but also nervous. He had discovered something that could reshape understanding of early experimental space technology, but he also knew that increased attention could bring challenges. Museums and private collectors might want to acquire it, and legal and financial complications could arise. For now, he focused on the work at hand, understanding the spaceship itself. Alex's mornings were spent meticulously cataloging every detail. He measured panels with calipers, photographed switches, and sketched diagrams of the cockpit instruments. He created detailed notes on every component, from the landing gear to the propulsion system. Each discovery revealed a small piece of the puzzle about how this craft might have functioned. He could imagine engineers testing it in isolated fields or secret facilities, conducting experiments that few outsiders would ever witness. The spaceship was more than a machine. It was a bridge to the past, a tangible link to human curiosity and innovation. As Alex continued his research, he realized there were still many unknowns. Some components seemed experimental, with functions that even the experts could only speculate about. The propulsion system, in particular, was unusual. Engineers theorized that it might have been designed for short atmospheric flights or possibly for early orbital testing. Alex could sense the mystery surrounding the spaceship, and that mystery fueled his dedication. He wanted to uncover every secret, but carefully, so nothing would be lost or damaged in the process. One evening, as the sun set over his workshop, Alex sat back and reflected on the discovery. He felt a mixture of wonder, responsibility, and even a touch of apprehension. The spaceship was rare, possibly one of the only remaining prototypes of its kind. He thought about the countless hours it must have taken to design, build, and test it. He thought about the unknown pilots and engineers who had worked with it and the risks they must have faced. It was a story that had been hidden for decades, and now Alex had the chance to bring it to light. Despite his excitement, Alex knew the road ahead would not be easy. Preserving the spaceship would require careful planning, funding, and collaboration with experts. He would need to ensure that it was protected from damage, studied responsibly, and eventually shared with the public in a way that honored its historical value. Every detail mattered. One wrong move could risk destroying something that might never be replaced. The responsibility weighed on him, but he embraced it. This was not just a discovery, it was a duty. In the following weeks, Alex invited more experts to study the spaceship. Engineers, historians, and aerospace enthusiasts came to examine it, each bringing their unique perspective. Some were amazed by the advanced materials, others by the design of the cockpit and controls. Each visitor left with a greater appreciation for what Alex had discovered. The craft's significance became clearer with every examination. Alex documented everything meticulously, creating an archive that included photographs, sketches, measurements, and expert notes. He realized that even if the spaceship were to be dismantled in the future, this record would preserve its story. Alex also began reaching out to museums and research institutions, quietly sharing information about the discovery. While some expressed interest in acquiring or displaying the spaceship, Alex insisted on a careful approach. He did not want it to be treated as a simple collectible or curiosity. This was a piece of history, and it deserved to be understood and preserved. Every discussion reminded him of the importance of his role, not just as a collector, but as a custodian of history. By the end of the month, the spaceship had become more than just a rare object in Alex's workshop. It had become a symbol of human ingenuity and the pursuit of knowledge. He often found himself sitting in the workshop late at night, examining components, imagining how it might have flown, and thinking about the engineers who had worked on it decades ago. Each detail brought him closer to understanding the craft, but it also deepened the mystery. Some questions might never be fully answered, but Alex knew that even the effort to uncover the truth was meaningful. As part 2 of the story concludes, Alex's initial excitement has grown into a deep sense of purpose. He is no longer just a collector. He is a historian, a caretaker, and an explorer of the past. The spaceship has revealed itself to be a rare and remarkable artifact, one that demands respect and careful study. Alex understands that the coming days will bring new challenges, discoveries, and perhaps even heartbreak, but he is ready. For now, he is focused on learning everything he can about the mysterious craft, preserving its secrets, and sharing its story with the world. After weeks of excitement and careful study, Alex Thompson began to realize that his discovery, remarkable as it was, came with a harsh reality. Though he had verified the spaceship's authenticity and documented every detail, the legal and financial situation surrounding it was complicated. The auction house contacted him with news that immediately cast a shadow over his enthusiasm. The estate of the previous owner had included strict instructions. All items were to be liquidated quickly, and any rare artifacts could not be kept indefinitely. Even though the spaceship was extraordinary, it was still considered property to be sold. Alex felt a tight knot in his stomach. For the first time since discovering the craft, he began to fear that it might not survive intact. He called the auction house representative to discuss the situation. The young woman on the other end of the line spoke politely, but her words were firm. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "I understand the importance of this artifact, but the estate is clear. Everything must be sold. There is a possibility that the spaceship could be dismantled for parts if no buyer agrees to purchase it as a whole. We cannot hold it indefinitely." Alex ran his hands through his hair. He had hoped that securing the spaceship at auction meant it would be safe, but now he realized that legality and ownership could override historical value. The thought of the craft being broken apart with its components scattered and lost made him feel sick. Over the next few days, Alex explored every possible solution. He contacted museums, historical societies, and aerospace foundations, explaining the spaceship's significance and pleading for assistance. Some expressed interest, but funding and logistics made immediate intervention impossible. Others suggested partnerships, but none could act fast enough to prevent the auction house from following the estate's instructions. Each phone call, each email, each polite rejection weighed heavily on Alex. He began to feel the pressure of time. Every hour that passed increased the risk that this rare artifact, the product of decades-old ingenuity, might be dismantled and disappear forever. Alex also wrestled with his own emotions. He had dreamed of this moment for years, discovering something extraordinary, holding a piece of history in his hands and sharing it with the world. Yet now, the joy he had felt was tinged with fear, frustration, and helplessness. He imagined the spaceship being cut apart, sold to private collectors who might never understand its importance, or worse, melted down for scrap metal. The thought made his chest tighten. He felt a personal responsibility to protect it, yet he was constrained by forces beyond his control. It was one thing to uncover history, he realized. It was another to save it. In an attempt to delay the inevitable, Alex sought legal advice. Lawyers familiar with estate law and historical artifacts examined the documents from the auction and the estate. They explained that unless a buyer could step in with immediate funds and a legal agreement to preserve the spaceship, there was little that could be done to prevent its dismantling. Alex felt frustration boil inside him. He had discovered something that could change understanding of early experimental space technology, yet bureaucracy and financial limitations threatened to undo his efforts. It was a bitter lesson in how fragile historical preservation could be. Determined not to give up, Alex organized a strategy. He prepared a detailed report on the spaceship, including photographs, technical measurements, and historical context. He reached out to every contact in his network, hoping to find a buyer or partner who could act quickly. He even contacted media outlets that specialized in science and history, hoping that public attention might encourage someone to intervene. Each day was a race against time, and Alex felt the weight of urgency pressing down on him. He could almost hear the ticking of a clock counting down the spaceship's fate. Despite his efforts, Alex faced disappointment at every turn. Museums acknowledged the craft's significance, but could not allocate funds immediately. Foundations interested in aerospace history were slow to respond. Potential buyers were hesitant, unsure about the legal complexities and costs involved in preserving such a unique artifact. Alex began to feel a sense of helplessness he had never experienced before. For the first time, he questioned whether discovery alone was enough. Sometimes, he realized, history was at the mercy of circumstances beyond passion and knowledge. During this period, Alex spent long hours in his workshop, sitting beside the spaceship, documenting every detail he could. He photographed panels, sketched cockpit controls, and measured every inch. Each time he touched the craft, he felt a mix of awe and sorrow. He imagined engineers and pilots who had worked on it decades ago, and he imagined how proud they might have been of their creation. Yet he also knew that if dismantled, all that work could vanish into obscurity. He wondered if the spaceship's story would survive, even in photographs and notes. Would future generations understand its importance without the original artifact? The thought gnawed at him relentlessly. Alex also began to prepare for the worst. He organized his documentation into a comprehensive archive, hoping to preserve as much information as possible. He created detailed diagrams of the cockpit, technical notes on the materials, and descriptions of unusual mechanisms that might never be replicated. He even reached out to engineers and historians to review his work, ensuring accuracy. The effort was painstaking, but Alex understood that if the spaceship could not survive physically, its story could still endure. In a strange way, this work became a form of solace. Even if he could not prevent dismantling, he could ensure that the craft's legacy lived on in records and memories. While dealing with these challenges, Alex also struggled with frustration toward the auction process. The staff were polite and professional, but he felt that the estate's rigid rules failed to consider the historical significance of what he had found. It seemed almost cruel that something so rare and important could be destroyed simply because of a legal requirement. He thought about the countless historical artifacts that had been lost over time due to similar circumstances, and he felt a growing sense of responsibility to fight for preservation. Every part of him wanted to find a solution, even if it seemed impossible. Amid the stress and uncertainty, Alex received a few small victories. Some private collectors expressed interest in purchasing the spaceship intact. Experts offered advice on handling the artifact carefully to prevent damage. These small successes reminded him that he was not alone in his mission. Others recognized the craft's importance and were willing to help, even if the timeline was tight. Yet, for every hopeful sign, there were setbacks. Time continued to pass, and the risk of dismantling loomed ever closer. Each day was a delicate balance between optimism and despair. Alex found that the emotional toll of the situation was heavier than he expected. Nights were spent lying awake, thinking about the spaceship, imagining scenarios in which it was dismantled, and feeling powerless to prevent it. He experienced moments of frustration, tears, and anger, but also moments of determination. He reminded himself that discovery alone was not enough. Preservation required persistence, creativity, and resilience. Each setback became a lesson in patience, and each small victory a reminder that hope was still possible. In addition to the legal and financial challenges, Alex faced practical concerns about the spaceship's safety. He realized that if it were to be dismantled, even the act of moving or disassembling parts could irreparably damage fragile components. Panels might be bent, switches broken, or the structural integrity compromised. The thought made his hands shake. He had to consider not only ownership but also physical protection. He began arranging for specialized storage, carefully supporting the craft to prevent any accidental damage while legal and financial arrangements were attempted. Every precaution mattered. Despite the growing pressure, Alex's commitment never wavered. He spent long hours speaking with historians, engineers, and legal advisors. He studied similar cases where rare artifacts were threatened and learned strategies for intervention. He even prepared potential legal agreements that could allow a museum or collector to purchase the craft under the condition that it remained intact. Alex became more than a collector. He became a guardian of history, a negotiator, and a strategist. He understood that discovering history was only the first step. Saving it was an entirely different challenge. Throughout this period, Alex also reflected on the meaning of his discovery. The spaceship was not just an object. It was a symbol of human ingenuity, curiosity, and ambition. Its story was intertwined with engineers, scientists, and dreamers who had dared to imagine possibilities beyond the known world. Preserving it was more than personal interest. It was about honoring their work and ensuring that future generations could learn from it. This perspective gave him strength and motivation to continue, even when the odds seemed stacked against him. As Part 3 concludes, Alex stands at a crossroads. He has discovered a rare and remarkable spaceship and documented it extensively. Experts confirm its importance, and the historical value is undeniable. Yet the reality of the estate's instructions, combined with legal, financial, and logistical challenges, threatens to undo everything he has worked for. The spaceship, once a source of pure excitement and discovery, now represents a fragile link to history that could be lost forever. Alex faces a difficult choice: continue the fight to preserve it intact, or accept that even the most remarkable discoveries are sometimes at the mercy of circumstances beyond one person's control. In the quiet of his workshop, Alex sits beside the spaceship, his hands resting lightly on its metallic surface. He feels a mixture of hope and dread, determination and helplessness. He has documented every detail, consulted with experts, and sought every possible ally. Yet he knows that time is running out. The spaceship, a symbol of human curiosity and courage, hangs in the balance. Alex's journey has transformed him from a collector into a guardian of history, but the ultimate outcome remains uncertain. The coming days will test his resolve, creativity, and dedication as he struggles to save the extraordinary artifact he discovered and preserve the story it holds for the world. Alex Thompson had faced weeks of uncertainty, frustration, and worry. The spaceship he had discovered, so rare and remarkable, had been at risk of being dismantled, and for a time it seemed like all his efforts might be in vain. Yet Alex refused to give up. The discovery had changed him. It had shown him that history was not just about events in books. It was about objects, people, and stories that survived time, waiting for someone to notice them. He knew that even if he could not save the spaceship physically, he could preserve its story, and that was worth every effort. He spent long hours in his workshop, surrounded by notes, photographs, sketches, and diagrams. Every detail he had documented became part of a growing archive that told the spaceship's story. He labeled every photograph carefully, recorded the dimensions of every panel, and wrote descriptions of the cockpit and the unusual instruments inside. Each sketch was detailed enough that someone reading it could imagine how the craft had been designed and built. Alex realized that while the physical spaceship might eventually be dismantled, the knowledge he preserved could last forever. To ensure the highest accuracy, Alex invited experts to review his documentation. Historians, aerospace engineers, and materials scientists examined every measurement, photograph, and note. They were impressed by the level of detail and care Alex had taken. Some of the engineers were particularly fascinated by the spaceship's design. They noted that certain components might have been experimental, never used in other spacecraft, and could offer insights into early aerospace innovation. Alex listened carefully to their observations, recording their interpretations in his growing archive. Each contribution made the story of the spaceship more complete. Alex also began creating a narrative to accompany the technical details. He wanted future generations to understand the human side of the discovery. He wrote about the engineers who might have worked on the spaceship decades ago, imagining the long hours they spent in workshops, testing engines, and adjusting instruments. He described the excitement and challenges of early aerospace experimentation, bringing the history alive. This approach transformed the archive from a collection of technical data into a story that could inspire curiosity and respect. Alex understood that history was not only about objects, but also about the people and dreams behind them. While preparing the archive, Alex also took steps to share the story with a wider audience. He reached out to museums, historical societies, and educational institutions. Some institutions were unable to acquire the spaceship itself due to logistical or financial reasons, but they were eager to access his documentation. Alex organized workshops and presentations where students and researchers could study the detailed plans and photographs. He wanted the spaceship to teach, inspire, and spark curiosity, even if it no longer existed in its original form. This became Alex's mission: to preserve knowledge and history, ensuring that the spaceship's legacy could continue. Despite the careful documentation and sharing of knowledge, the emotional challenge remained. Alex had formed a deep connection with the craft. He had spent countless hours examining its surfaces, imagining the engineers and pilots who had interacted with it, and feeling the weight of history in his hands. Letting go, even knowing he had preserved its story, was difficult. He took long walks alone, reflecting on the journey from discovery to documentation. Each step reminded him of the fragile nature of history and how discoveries, no matter how important, could be threatened by circumstance. Yet these reflections strengthened his resolve. He had done everything he could, and the spaceship's story would survive because of his dedication. One day, Alex received a call that brought both relief and sadness. A private collector had purchased the spaceship from the auction house with the agreement that it would be dismantled for parts. Alex felt a pang of disappointment, but reminded himself of the work he had done to preserve the knowledge of the craft. While the physical object would be gone, the research, measurements, and narrative he had created ensured that the spaceship would not disappear from history. The collector, recognizing the uniqueness of the craft, agreed to keep some of the most significant components intact for documentation, which provided a small consolation. Alex used this moment as an opportunity to reflect on the broader meaning of his work. He realized that preserving history was not only about keeping objects intact. Sometimes, the most important preservation was the knowledge, understanding, and story surrounding an artifact. Through his careful documentation, collaboration with experts, and engagement with the public, Alex had turned a fleeting discovery into a lasting legacy. He understood that the value of history lay not only in physical survival, but also in its ability to educate, inspire, and connect generations. In the weeks that followed, Alex continued to expand the archive. He included detailed photographs of components, technical diagrams, expert annotations, and historical context about experimental space programs from the 1960s. He even created 3D models from the measurements and photographs, allowing researchers and students to virtually explore the spaceship. This approach ensured that even without the physical craft, the essence of its design and its significance could be experienced by anyone with interest. Alex found satisfaction in seeing how technology, history, and education could intersect to preserve knowledge. Through this process, Alex also began mentoring younger enthusiasts and students. He hosted small workshops where they could learn about historical aerospace technology and the methods used to document artifacts. He shared not only technical knowledge but also the story of discovery, emphasizing patience, curiosity, and dedication. The students were inspired, asking questions, making sketches, and imagining the journeys of engineers decades ago. Alex realized that the spaceship had become more than an object. It was now a tool for learning and inspiration. Its story had transcended its physical form, becoming a bridge between the past and the future. As the archive grew, Alex also engaged in writing articles and preparing presentations for conferences focused on aerospace history. He explained the significance of the discovery, the challenges of preservation, and the importance of documenting rare artifacts. Each presentation reminded him of why he had embarked on this journey in the first place: to share knowledge, to honor human ingenuity, and to inspire curiosity. Even though the spaceship itself would not survive, its story could influence new generations of engineers, historians, and dreamers. Over time, Alex's efforts began to attract wider recognition. Articles in specialized magazines and websites celebrated the story of the spaceship, highlighting both the discovery and the challenges of preserving it. People from around the world expressed fascination with the project, and many were inspired by Alex's dedication. He received letters from students thanking him for sharing the detailed archive, explaining how it had motivated them to learn more about aerospace history. In these moments, Alex felt that the spaceship's legacy was truly alive, not in metal and rivets, but in knowledge, inspiration, and curiosity. Despite the bittersweet nature of the spaceship's physical fate, Alex found peace in his work. He reflected on the journey from discovery to preservation and recognized that he had done everything within his power to protect history. The process had transformed him personally as well. He had grown from a collector into a historian, educator, and custodian of knowledge. The spaceship had taught him lessons about patience, responsibility, and the power of storytelling. Its story was no longer confined to his workshop. It had entered the world and would continue to inspire curiosity for generations to come. In the quiet moments, Alex sometimes sat beside the remaining components and photographs, imagining the spaceship as it had once been. He could picture it flying through the skies, a symbol of human ambition, courage, and creativity. Though the craft had been dismantled, its spirit remained. The knowledge he had preserved, combined with the memories, sketches, and narratives, ensured that the extraordinary story of the spaceship would endure. Alex understood that history was more than objects. It was about discovery, preservation, and sharing knowledge for the benefit of all. By the end of the project, Alex had created an archive so detailed and comprehensive that it could serve as a reference for future historians and engineers. He had documented every detail, preserved the story of its design, and ensured that the human efforts behind it were recognized. The spaceship, though no longer intact, had achieved something remarkable. It had inspired learning, curiosity, and dedication. Alex felt a sense of fulfillment that surpassed the thrill of discovery. In preserving knowledge, he had given the craft a new life, one that would endure far beyond the physical limitations of its metal. Alex's journey also reminded him of the fragility of history. Objects can be lost, destroyed, or dismantled, but the stories, knowledge, and passion surrounding them can survive if someone is willing to protect and share them. The spaceship had been rare, extraordinary, and irreplaceable, but through meticulous documentation, collaboration, and education, its essence was now immortal. Alex knew that the lessons learned from this experience would guide him in future discoveries and efforts to preserve history. In the end, Alex realized that the spaceship had given him more than he could have imagined. It had given him purpose, connection, and a story that could inspire others. He had preserved history, honored the work of engineers long gone, and shared knowledge that could ignite curiosity in countless minds. The spaceship had transcended its physical form to become a symbol of human imagination, determination, and the importance of safeguarding history. And through Alex's dedication, its story would continue to soar, reaching far beyond the workshop where it had first been rediscovered.